All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Factory Reset podcast. Today, apart from our regular Prashant, we have Chris from Jungheinrich joining us for the session. So I'm really excited for what we have to discuss today. But before we do that, maybe, Chris, you can introduce yourself, and then we can get into the session.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for inviting me for this session. So my name is Christoph, but Chris is completely fine. I'm working for Jungheinrich in Singapore, where let's say it's very difficult to say exactly what I do, but it's more a role of sales manager for mobile robots and warehouse automation for the APAC region.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So today's session, what I wanted to focus on was the mobile robotics and automation sector. I guess more specific around mobile robotics, how the industry is evolving, especially in Southeast Asia and Asia compared to US and Europe, and just talk about broader trends that we see in the industry. So when I was doing research for our fundraising process a couple of years ago, what industry report said that the AMR AGV market could reach a market size of about $22 billion by 2030. That seems like a really large number, large industry, but frankly, I've not seen as much deployments yet, especially in Southeast Asia or Asia. But before kind of jumping into that as a market trend, maybe the discussion of or definition of AMR AGV seems to be very different from company to company and person to person. So before we jump into the sector, we could just start off with what you think an AMR is, and how do you see the market having evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, over let's say that the last years I heard a lot of different definitions. What's the difference between the HGV and the AMR? So for me, the difference is actually in the naming of it, which is already automated and autonomous. So autonomous means that, let's say, all the intelligence is actually within the robot itself. In the automated guided vehicle, the HGV, the intelligence is not in the vehicle itself. So it's not autonomous. So this is for me my definition of what's the difference between these two, I would say, product categories. When it's about the market size, so I mean, I also follow all those, let's say, market intelligence tools that are actually they are available. What I see is actually that every year the forecast is getting pushed to the future. So I saw it, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, it was 20 billion USD, now it's 22 billion USD, but it's always just pushing forward. Where I think that this market or the projected market growth, I mean, I'm pretty sure it will happen, but it will take more time than what is projected at the moment.
Got it. Yeah. And maybe I think one of the interesting things as well is you were just talking about how you've exposure in a few different markets, right? So when you've been in Singapore for a while now, and do you see, maybe we can start off with how the adoption of the mobile robotics sector has been in a few different geographies, how you've seen that, let's say, in Europe, and with your company. I think you would have data from within your company as well. But apart from that, generally, how do you see that adoption in a region like Europe versus Southeast Asia? Do you see that significant difference?
Very significant difference. So it's not only about, let's say, I mean, let's start from the client's expectations. So a client, or let's say, the discussion normally for mobile robots starts with, okay, what is my ROI? What does the equipment do for me? And let's say there are regions in the world where I would say it's easier to implement such things because of standardization. When I take a look into a warehouse in, let's say, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, or France, you have more space than in Asia, and it's much more standardized. Standardized in terms of, in Europe, you have most of the time the so-called European pallet in the different categories, but it's always the same size. If you do that in, let's say, Singapore or Malaysia or Thailand, you have 20 different pallets in one warehouse. And this is one, let's say, big hurdle for the technology itself. That can you even handle that? Those circumstances makes the big different. So on one side, it's easier in, let's say, the US or Europe to implement it because you don't have that hurdles. And you also have, I would say, the financial benefit is easier to achieve than in low-cost countries or lower-cost countries, where the labor is still on the cheaper side.
Interesting. And maybe Prashant, maybe this is something that you can chip in as well, right? We do a lot of our deployments. We don't work in Europe yet, and we do a lot of deployments regionally. So what Chris mentioned about the labor costs being significantly different space and standardization being a problem as well. How do you see that kind of spanning out in terms of adoption?
Yeah, no, I think quite a similar thought as well along with Chris. But I think in terms of, of course, let's talk about space-wise, right? Some of the factories are rather brownfields, which have been here in this region for like 30 years, 40 years. It's very hard to to really compress a high throughput operation with like a fleet of 15, 20 vehicles. That's just not possible. So that space-wise, of course, we have those kind of scenarios falling out. But although then you have the factories, automotive factories that can be more larger, so there it's a bit more easier. Also, when Chris was saying and talking about, let's say, adoption as well in this region and where it makes sense. Even same for us, right? We predominantly started off in a lot of developing, in Southeast Asia and countries where labor is still very cheap, right? We are predominantly, let's say, in India, Indonesia. Singapore is still okay, but we have seen like now in last 2 years when we have been in Australia, like it's a very clear difference of like, okay, that automation is the way. It makes sense on for them to just in terms of justification. It's just a matter of whether the automation is reliable, whether the technology is the right fit. So that's some of the things which we have also seen it very clearly in terms of geography and impact of where the justification makes sense. But I think in terms of what I think Chris, you were saying about the standardization, I think this, yeah, very, very true. Often we in this region, we often, of course, gets squeezed a lot by in terms of, okay, because where the customers want to at least push as much as operations to be automated, right? But I think that's where, like, as technology builders and solution providers, we know that there is a limit to it. I can't do 20 pallets, right? When we are designing it for certain, and that's always gets a bit of, always in the challenge of way, like, okay, how much we can automate here. But standardization, especially I think when you look at the newer vehicles, right, new type of technologies, I think you look at VNAs, reach trucks, right? I think those adoptions in this region, I would say, and Chris, you can comment me if I'm wrong, but still taking a bit of time. Primarily a lot of reasons, but I think standardization where, for example, like, this pallet is like what we can handle and what we've designed. But now if it's out of tolerance or we have so many different type of pallets, it's very difficult to implement those technologies successfully. A POC is different than running it successfully, and I think Chris, probably you would have this this experience a lot. But I think that's one thing I've observed, right? I think the old technologies of the vehicles, which were like small scale or which maybe are not handling the parts directly, right? Maybe there's a shelf on top, and on top there's parts. I think those have adopted. The adoption has been quite high in this region, but I think versus technologies like, okay, VNAs, reach trucks, for that matter, trailer loading is coming up as well, but I think that's still taking a lot of time. Maybe standardization has to play a big part in that. But that's my take.
Totally agree. Especially on the one part, what you said. You don't even need to look, let's say, outside of the APAC region. You see the whole geographic difference also in the APAC region, because you mentioned Australia before. Let's say nowadays, when I, let's say, have something on my table for Australia, the ROI, it's almost nothing, because there you have labor costs for one forklift driver of somewhere around 100,000 Australian dollars. It's a no-brainer that you go there for AGVs or automated equipment, especially with a multi-shift operation. You reach ROIs of less than 2 years.
One thing which I've observed from what Prashant and we have interacted with customers is, like you said, ROI is being much shorter, does push the agenda out, does the push agenda a lot faster in terms of getting things automated. But what we have seen in context of India and Southeast Asia is sometimes the other one which works to get automation done is the central team pushing for automation because they want to modernize their factories across the region. So I feel in Southeast Asia and India, the push, I mean, they do have an ROI requirement of like, let's say I need within a certain timeline. It has to be longer. It cannot be 2 years. It has to be 3 or 5 years. But the one kind of trend driving adoption a little bit more has been a central push from the global team to say that I want to modernize my facilities. So I have alternative contingency facilities in case one of the other plants go down. So they want to kind of step up quality, step up enough quality in this other facilities so they have continuity plans built in place across the region and not just depend on one specific country. So maybe I think one thing I can kind of digress from here slightly in a different topic is just about, I think, what you mentioned. So one, standardization being a problem of which automation still needs to tackle. The more standardized, the more easy to automate. So certain companies still have multiple kinds of parts they need to move, multiple kinds of process they need to automate, which if you want to automate all with a single product means it becomes a very expensive product. The more variation you want to handle with a certain product, naturally, the more expensive it becomes. Uh, do you think that's one of the reasons why companies in the mobile robotics space, there are a lot of vendors out in the market today, but when I did my research, I was a lot of large mobile robotics companies that are purely profitable yet. So there is aggressive pricing to win deals. But do you think it's a mix of not having standardized processes yet that can be easily automated with a simpler design, plus competitive pressure, which is creating the situation where there's aggressive pricing with not a lot of bottom line profits yet in this industry?
Well, that's a very tricky question. So, I mean, let's say when it's about the profit or sustainability, I think it's actually getting lesser at the moment. I think there are just too many players in the market. A lot of them, let's say, are funded from investors where, they have to show growth. And you only show growth if you get more projects. But the thing is, there is a limited project, especially, let's say, what we talked before, that the market is not developing as the statistics or, let's say, the forecast is saying it. So everyone is, I would say, fighting for the deal, even though if it means you go with, say, no profit in there just to cover some costs or to show growth. And I think that this is the biggest issue. If it's about the process, to be honest, I'm not sure, because I would say the standardized processes are more, how to say it, I would say it's limiting the market or limiting the amount of projects. So for sure, if you have more, or let's say, equipment then that is much more flexible, that can handle, let's say, 20 different pallets, your market for this product is bigger. Then maybe you do not have that market condition as it is now. So, yeah, if it makes sense, what I said, yes, I think there is a correlation.
Yeah,
But very difficult, I would say.
similar to what we were also hypothesizing, right? So if, like you said, more and more processes similar, the opportunity as a market gets bigger, which means you have more projects to go after, which means you don't have to fight as pricing on a pure way to win deals from the limited market that you have. But at the same time, going after like specialized use cases, or let's say one way is to wait for the market to standardize processes. The other one is to build technology which can handle multiple variations, but that also means that your product becomes more expensive. Then you have to think about, does that close down the market again? So it's a little bit of a tricky question, one that we keep a lookout for. But I think considering what you said, there's a lot of expectations of growth in a market which is not yet there, which is why there is a push from certain vendors to get deployments out, even at low prices, so that they can show top line growth. Do you see this changing over the next 3 to 5 years?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, I mean, we already see it that also, let's say, established players, where, let's say, they are doing a lot of customization, where we see every project is a specific build for the customer. that those companies are not surviving, because it's just let's say what you put in and what you get out, it's not matching. And there I think that, I mean, you also see from other companies, let's say revenue go up, but the profit is very often not even existing, and there is an end date to all those things. No one can play this game forever. There I think that we are already in the consolidation of the market, or shortly before. There I'm very certain about.
Got it. Prashant, your thoughts on? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, if we talk about, I mean, maybe start with this region as well, right? Southeast Asia itself, or India. Yeah, I think even, yes, there's even today, there's a lot of constant aggressive pricing to really win the projects, get the top line. But I think what we have seen, some of the companies already had impacted, and I think they had to be acquired, or they had to take other extreme measures. That has sort of shown that, I mean, I think every project, customized project and aggressive pricing, on top of that is not really the long-term play here. I think what um, I mean, may not be within 1 or 2 years, but I think in about, yeah, I mean, in a couple of years, I think it's more important, I think, for customers as well to realize this, that, okay, I mean, that want a solution and you want something for long term, and also evaluate the solution, the technology, and the vendors in according to that. But the other side will also happen, right? I mean, today you have vendors. Today you might have vendors who are giving. You have 5 vendors who are giving all aggressive pricing. 3 years later, will you have all 5, or you will have 1 or 2 left? I think that itself will reduce, and then the customers will see the same, right? Okay, I don't have those options anymore. So I think it will happen. It's a matter of time. So I maybe not 1 2 years, but definitely I think over a span of 3 4 5 years, because at some point you have to look at long term and sustainable.
The challenge, I think, especially for us, is, I mean, we want to be growing, but growing sustainably. We've been particular about this. Maybe Chris, you can share from your perspective as well, but considering there is competition, people are being aggressive on pricing, does not mean that we can stop growing, but because we still need to show that yearly things are moving forward, we are making our revenue targets, etc. I mean, we have to be careful and particular about it. Our strategy has been to build relationship with customers over time. We've not been very aggressive about onboarding too many customers, but rather working with our customers closely. And as you build trust, they see the value, then you have a little bit more leeway in kind of defining what is sustainable price, both for them and for you. That, like you said, gives them an attractive ROI, gives you enough room to like build a business with. But it also means that we have to be particular about how quickly we grow. We can't, if you say we're going to grow 5x in a year, the only way is, like you said, is to throw products out in the market, win projects that are lost, and then, like you said, 3 years away down the line, don't have a business around anymore. So our model has been building close customer relationships, creating value add, maybe just beyond the hardware through other services that we can do, like intelligent orchestration, data analytics of what they're running in the facility, predictive maintenance, and all of that. So this kind of is like a segue into the topic of business model, right? So two parts to it. One, as an established player, larger player, how are you kind of tackling this pricing and competitive pressure? And then from there, what business models do you think make sense for companies to adopt, which are serious about building a long-term sustainable business, so they can kind of get through this competitive pressure over the next few years?
But I think our approach is pretty much similar. So we are not playing the game of a price war, because that one we cannot win, or it doesn't make sense to win it. So our approach is similar to yours. It's not like that we, let's say, react on every client who is shouting out, I want to have an AGV or whatever. It's more we try to, let's say, guide our clients and to consult with them. Does it, first of all, to answer the question, does it make sense to automate? what does it need to automate. So a kind of guiding them and to be actually a partner in that. Because let's say a lot of clients, it's a thing what you mentioned before, it's that the headquarters saying you have to do automation, you have to do this. But actually what it means to do all this, it's very often not known. And that's then where we come into the game to help, guide and consult them with what's possible and what is not possible. And as soon as, let's say, and with that, you also have a kind of a basis of, I would say, trust. And also, and those things are actually what are the selling points what we have. Because there, then the customer sees, okay, are you serious in what you do? And let's say you have to make the business case for it. You have to have, it's like building a house, you have to have a good foundation, then you can build something on it. If the foundation is already bad, the house will not stand for long.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense, right? I think kind of touching upon a topic which we have had some questions from customers around, but we don't have enough data to say that this makes sense. Is around the RAS model, robotics as a service. A lot of companies, they've been trying. Okay, from our perspective, a lot of customers do ask for a RAS model. They discuss this with us for a couple of weeks, months, and then decide a CapEx model makes more sense for them because they have ownership. And over a 3-5 year period, they might make more payback from a CapEx and a RAS model. So that's been our experience in Southeast Asia. Do you see that as being like a potential business model that becomes more popular over the years, or is it a more geographic thing where it might be more popular in certain geographies but not so popular in other geographies?
I would say it's independent from the geography. I mean, we see it in APAC. Every country, including Australia, is asking for such, we call it rental or robot as a service, the same thing, where they're asking for that. And from my point of view, it makes a lot of sense to have such a model, because if you have a ROI, it means you have a saving already in the first month. This is number one. And the number two is that because you do not need to have CapEx for it, you can invest in something else. So you can do multiple things at the same time. So this is the big advantage. On one side, for sure, it's also a little bit, I would say, a risk for the vendor or for the supplier that you go into such a model, because very often, let's say trading of the forks and whatever is pretty much customized. Sometimes, not always. Then is the question, if this is not that what the customer wants, what to do with the equipment. That's, I think, the risk and the chance in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the same, like one of the concerns we had. If you invest in a fleet of 100 robots, and let's say out of the 100 robots, all of them have different configurable dimensions, length, height, the specific dimension of the forks, etc. Then once the customer says they want to end their contract, where do you move the bots to? Which essentially means you're pricing this, investing this into the inventory upfront, and hoping that you get a much better payback than a CapEx model.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think
just to add one thing, and that's also again, let's say, making the bridge actually to what you said before. If you have a higher standardization in the market, it would also allow the vendor or the supplier to use this truck in somewhere else. But when everything is very specific, what to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Prashant, I think from like what you have been discussing and speaking with, from the customer's perspective, like Chris is saying, there's a good demand for us, but we have not seen that span out. Even if we do want to support with a standardized product, I think there's been some cases where customers have said, I think it's okay for me to do an upfront fee instead. So from your perspective, like what has been that reason for them not wanting to go down the RAS model, especially when, like Chris said, they can potentially get ROI from day one instead of having to wait an 18 to 21 period?
Yeah, I think it's something that we're also trying to really get specific answers from customers, like because we have used this or thrown this to really see like, does this help to like close the deals faster, quicker? I mean, we can only say it from these specific countries or region. I would say like I mean Southeast Asia or India, where like if I have to say like out of 4, 5, 6 sort of inquiries where we have offered it, maybe 1 or 2 have actually gone through it to really see that okay, yes, because I want that flexibility of the the RAS model, right? I think, and that's all primarily due to because what I've at least realized is one of the key reasons why they've gone for it is so that have the flexibility. But in terms of um, whenever we have seen capex versus opex, meaning, I mean, um, to them, the flexibility is not an important a factor, right? Because in a factory, for example, they know that this operation will be running, unlike a, let's say, 3PL warehouse. 3PL warehouse, they might have to shift these assets around. So I think they view it differently than a factory or shop floor when they view an investment. And I think we have seen that in the factory cases. I think they still tend to just look for capex or capitalization model, um, and I think primarily still, and they will do that TCO analysis and all in, but I think for them either it's they get that funding and they basically have to utilize it immediately, otherwise it basically goes away next year, and maybe partly I think that's one of the reasons could be because as a project as for customer also, if they don't utilize the funding, then they'll have to put their so why not, why this, and maybe they are getting funding only from like okay, this year you have this much, utilize it. Versus in warehouses, I think they really look for everything on as flexible basis as because their own contracts will be like after 2 years I may not have investment. That's one of the at least reasons I can just categorize it, but I think yeah, we have still not seen like as it was adopted as yet. I don't know if maybe US and Europe we had seen a couple of companies, I think, Rahul, who had really initiated this thing as their core model, right? As like RAS and not just AMRs, but I think robotic arms and all. I'm not sure how well they have gone along with in that road.
Yeah. I mean, I think RAS is a very popular buzzword in the US more than other places. I think one big company which pushed that agenda was Fetch Robotics, which I think if you guys read the news, Zero decided to shut down their operations. So there's definitely challenges. I think, like Chris said, standardization means RAS is more likely to be successful, but maybe today it's not yet in a full stage where we can make that happen at scale yet. But yeah, I think for us, we're not really being aggressive about RAS because, like you said, we want to be conserving our capital for more relevant opportunities. So that's one of the reasons why we are not pushing aggressively. So I think I'll go back to like one specific point which Chris you mentioned earlier about the market forecast for mobile robotics being revised downwards recently, right? And then we spoke about a few things about the operations of customers, etc. But do you think there's a part which the macroeconomic trends are playing towards not just mobile robotics but automation in large, where people are a little bit more uncertain about how the next couple of years will look like globally, and that is shifting their decisions to invest in automation in terms of large capex projects?
I mean, I would say I'm now almost 12, 13 years in this industry. Every year, at the end of the year, we got told next year will be very challenging. Everything is uncertain and everything. So I'm not sure if that is true now. So, I mean, what's definitely true is that, let's say, all the life cycle of everything becomes shorter and shorter. That's for sure. But I think that this, let's say, all those uncertainty and so on, is also pushing actually automation. Because on one side, for sure, you do not know how the market is reacting, but on the other side, you also don't know how about inflation, labor costs, and everything. And I think it's on one side, it's a kind of, I would say, insurance to do automation. That even for changing market conditions in terms of, let's say, labor or whatever, or crisis like COVID crisis or whatever, if you have automation, the impact is lesser actually.
Got it. And this trend of reshoring of manufacturing, especially to the US by American manufacturers, do you see that kind of changing the plans for their facilities in the rest of the world, or it's like I said, continuing as per normal, no major impact yet?
Short term, I think, how to say, I think the investments done now is more, I would say, we'll focus the next years on improvement of current operation. Very likely that, let's say, new operations are then maybe not in our region, yeah. But that's all I think short term. On the long term, it will not have a big impact because I'm very sure that will change again.
Yeah, that's true. I think similar opinion we have as well, because building a new factory is not a 1 year, 2 year, or building a new warehouse is not a 1 year, 2 year project. It's a 3, 4, 5 year project, which by the time it's done means you have a new governance in place.
Exactly.
True. So maybe I think I'll kind of switch into another area as well. So, one thing we have been debating about is hardware versus software and robot. And like you said, especially with more and more players being in the market today, it, at least from our opinion, it's been harder and harder to differentiate purely from a hardware perspective. And we have been identifying other ways, especially in the software domain, either of the autonomy layer on the mobile robot or on services around it, which is the fleet management, your dashboarding, your analytics. So our hypothesis is that as a hardware-only player, it becomes much harder to thrive in the industry because you're kind of put into the same bucket as everyone else. And we have been spending a lot more time in identifying what makes sense for customers and for us to be prioritizing from a product development point of view. And our current assumption is it's going to be on the orchestration layer above the robot, which makes, we think of it as like a very good factory manager. If you're a really good factory manager managing your workers on the factory, you have more productivity. Similar to that, if you can build software that can ensure that all the robots are working together effectively, you create better value for the robots and consequently better value for your customers, which means you don't compete just purely on a per robot price anymore. So that's been our focus areas now for at least for the last couple of years, and I think will form a large part of our strategy moving forward as well. But I want to understand from your opinion, what are you seeing from your company's point of view as well as other players in terms of how they're approaching this hardware versus software, or is there another area of innovation that they're starting to focus on?
I also see it similar to you. Let's say I think software is key in this at the moment. So when we look at let's say most of the companies in this market, or a lot of them, come from the software side, and they are experts in. And let's say only a few companies like us, for example, we are, let's say, the experts in the production of AGVs. Let's say, so there I clearly can say most likely there's no better company in doing that, but definitely in software. Of course, let's say all those companies also like you are, it's much more agile in the development of software, and you're a software expert. And this is, I think, where we are a little bit lacking on, but also, let's say, trying to keep up. Because when you fight for a project, you will bring up, let's say, all the software topics on the table, which is, I mean, that's a clear benefit for the customer. And there, let's say, traditional, let's say, manufacturing companies like we are, it's very difficult to, let's say, compete in this. So there, definitely, I think software is key. And it's also, you can have the best equipment. It will not help you if your software is not utilizing it fully. So it takes both, I would say. But only software is not helping. Only a good robot is not helping. It's the way. Let's say the thing is actually, are you able to utilize the equipment fully? That's the thing. And there, software is key.
Yeah, got it. Maybe if you want to kind of add on.
Yeah, no, I think last statement was Chris, what you said, right? I mean, how well you utilize the product, the robot is really then comes down to, how good your software is in terms of usability point of view, but also in terms of increasing the productivity of it, right? To what level of complexities it can handle, what level of equations and logic, workflow priorities, logics it can handle. I think that's and which is what I think for us also we are focusing or rather trying to build a lot more expertise there. But of course, this only comes in, I think, Chris, to your point, yes. I mean, your vehicle has to have a certain base level of course, reliability and performance, right? Only after that, the customer is also ready to talk about, well, okay, maybe we are not productive here. Maybe we can be a lot more intelligent here. Which, I mean, fortunately for us, we have some of these key accounts now in that phase of journey, right? Because they have gone through that, okay, phase of like a first AMI implemented, okay, multiple fleet of AMIs implemented. Now it's like, okay, how do I get maximum out of my fleet? Then that's the stage of like, okay, software is the only thing because vehicle is not going to do any further than that. But I think, yeah, that we ideally, of course, we want more and more such of kind of customers be with us, or rather in the industry as well, right? Because if more we have more of these kind of customers, then the industry has also gone into that of maturity as well. I think maybe here, Chris, you can probably, but I guess in Europe, or rather in certain segments of Europe, be it automotive factories, I'm guessing for them, that's the segment they are currently in for some time, right? Okay, now it's about productivity, now it's about intelligent orchestration, right? But I think I think this region is slowly coming, making its way towards that. So yeah, I mean, going back to I think Rahul's question on that. Yeah, I mean, for us also, yeah, software is the same, and that's what we're trying to, of course, communicate more to the customers as well. But again, it goes back to where the customer is in their journey, right? I mean, if they're in the journey of phase one, phase two, I think they matter. Make sure my robot does not go crash into something. There's no incident. That's what in their head. That's the biggest problem, right? But yeah, I think that's one. Of course, part of, I mean, how the uh, models and distinction is happening. I think, Rahul, just to probably something interesting that we are starting to see as well in the industry, not so much from our Botsync side, but I think some of the newer um, players or some of the existing players trying to look at some really niche use cases which have been like just not, which has been like long pending, like no one has been looking at it, or maybe the technology is as maturing. Like I think trailer loading, trailer unloadings, as starting to like, I mean, people are starting to like deep dive into it, but I think that's some people are finding that way of like distinguishing themselves, which, I mean, yes, if done successfully, of course, it's a very complicated problem statement, but if you really do it well, you might be the like, at this moment, only handful. So I think some people are taking that approach, and versus, of course, I mean, for us, the software is what we see as a more long-term problem statement. Yeah, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah, because you mentioned the trailer loading, our managing director is always saying the company that can do the trailer loading and comply with all standards, they have found the holy grail in this market.
Yeah.
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 And very difficult problem statement. And like you said, it's also one of the places where standardization is much harder because you have all sorts of trucks, containers coming in, different ways of pallet. It's being stacked. Yeah, if you can figure that out, a great market unlock. So I think I kind of since you're talking about like how companies are kind of differentiating themselves. One topic which I've been thinking about for us as well has been with customer success. Because what first part is implementing the products and getting the ROI, getting the implementation, getting to an implementation stage. But if your customer success and service portion, the after sales part of it, doesn't work or doesn't deliver uptime the way the customers expect, it does two things. One, as a vendor, you lose out on market opportunity because that customer is unlikely to expand with you. And second, it gives the wrong impression of automation to that customer. And the industry being small enough, it kind of spreads, and then people start thinking about, okay, maybe automation is not yet mature for me to deploy. The challenge we have is one, like you said, as we grow, We need to build the network out a little bit faster, not for what we're deployed, but what we're likely to deploy. Because by the time you deployed it, you can't be having an insufficient number of resources to execute a customer success. The second part has been talent, because especially in Southeast Asia and Asia, the challenge of finding trained technicians who understand automation is not an easy thing to do. So you have a lot of time to be spent on training and upskilling people before you can deliver quality work to the end customers. I know at Jungheinrich, from what I've spoken to you guys before, for your manual trucks, that was a critical component of ensuring after sales is top notch. How did you kind of deliver on that on automation as well, to ensure people are happy with and comfortable with your implementations?
Yeah, so first of all, I completely agree. It's one thing to implement the project. It's the other thing to keep it running. So I would say we as Jungheinrich, we have the, I would say, almost luxury that we have already a lot of service technicians everywhere. And we also have, let's say, products of different kind of complexity. So when it starts with manual trucks, it starts with semi-automatic trucks, and then we also have for sure the automation. The good thing is that, we have staff that is experienced with semi-automatic vehicles, and then let's say it's just a further step to bring them on the level for the automated equipment. Therefore, let's say we also invest a lot in all the training academy and everything. So we have our own organization for that. Kind of every time we go somewhere in an area or a country where we have not done the AGV or AMR yet, we are sure we can support that. Because we also have a lead time of multiple months and so on. And then in this time, we, let's say, train the available resources so that we can service this. But
Yeah.
I think it's a luxury in this industry for us now. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's an advantage you can definitely leverage to make sure you win those right projects instead of the wrong ones. So I think like a few last questions to kind of wind up the session. So one, like you pointed out, ROI estimation, etc. Especially companies starting out on automation, when they look at ROI, they don't really look at TCO properly, the total cost of ownership, right? So apart from the upfront cost of the project, what other costs do you think is important for customers to truly factor in before they decide that, okay, this is what my ROI would look like with this particular product or particular vendor?
When it's about the costing, I mean, let's say the whole project consists out of the project investment, the initial one. The service, support, and what's very important, spare parts. I think that's a thing where a lot of customers do not take into account that they also need spare parts. For example, the battery you have to charge after or change after some years, or a certain amount of charging the cycles. And let's say there is quite a long tail that needs to be considered on costs. But those are, I would say, main points customer need to consider.
Prashant, anything from you on that?
Yeah, no, I think we have always seen in TCOs, of course, in addition to I think what Chris mentioned, right? You have spare parts, you have your consumables, you have of course service on like additional requests, right? I think a lot of times, I think what customers also realize is that once they adopt in first year, I think every year they always tend to have, continuous changes or requests like coming in as well, right? Which is a good thing, but of course, you also need to ensure that those are also coming in with additional benefits, so it should not hamper your total investments as well. So we have more integrations, more add-ons, more changes as well, which also comes in the whole 7, 8 year, 10-year long of project ownership.
Yeah,
but I think it's also very, very difficult to say what is the total cost of ownership. Let's say, I'm pretty sure you know that when you talk about the software. After 1 year, to have a new warehouse manager, he wants to have a completely new dashboard or whatever. You can never actually really determine at the beginning what will be the total cost of ownership. Because with all those changes, you can assume, okay, roughly this is what we take and change it. But it was very difficult to argument that to a customer because customers say, no, we know exactly what we want to have. This is it, and we do not want to make any changes. But in the end, there will be change. So it's a very tricky thing how to give them a cost of ownership.
Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So
Exactly.
100%. Amazing. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Prashant, for taking the time. I had a wonderful time. Hope you guys did too.
Thank you very much.
All right, we can end the session here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Rahul.